Good evening, everyone. I am Councilwoman Surgeon, a member of the OMBGA committee, and we also have Councilwoman Woodley's Bermudez. We are waiting for Councilman Clark, who was the co-chair, and the other co-chair, Council President Rosado, will not be with us. So give us a few minutes to have Councilman Clark sign on, and we can get the meeting started. I think we only need, we have two council person here, so at least we have a quorum to get the meeting going. Councilman Clark looks like he's here. Councilman Clark, would you like to take over your OMBGA meeting? Well, at least I have no problems with going, if Councilman Mitchum would like to get item number 4 going so he can make his schedule.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I'll notify him right now.
Great. And when Councilman Clark signs on, we will let him know that we will take number 4 up first. There are 5 items on the, oh, no, there's 4 items on the agenda. And I believe we're just going to wait for Councilman Clark to sign on. He's doing that right now. There you go, Councilman Clark, you're here. Great. The meeting has started. We just introduced ourselves, so Councilperson Rosario won't be with us. So you are the chair for the evening. So one of the things Councilwoman Bermudez has asked is that we go with item number 4 first, due to the fact that Councilman Mitchum has another scheduled appointment. And if you can take item 4 up first, that'd be great to give him a chance to leave at 6. I can hear you. You're mute. David, there you go. You're good?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good. There's something going on with the system. So good. Good evening, everyone. My apologies. There's been some technology issues. Councilwoman Surgeon, you already opened up?
Yes, sir. We started talking. Councilman Bermudez and myself have signed on. So I believe you have a quorum, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Good evening to all those that have joined us from the Finance Department, the OMB Department as well, and the Tax Office and the listening audience. I believe the request was for us to take the items out of order to go with item number 4 first. So if there's no objections from the rest of the voting committee members, I believe that we will do that. So item number 4 was substitute ordinance amending chapter 2, article 18, section 2-860, motor vehicle policy of the Hartford Municipal Code. And we have the representative from the Working Families Party who introduced this, Councilwoman Woodley Bermudez. So you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And thank you, colleagues, for allowing this item to go first, just so that, we want to accommodate Councilman Mictum's obligation at 6 p.m. So Councilman Mictum, I am in communication with him right now, and he's joining in as we speak. So you'll be seeing him come through. But just wanted to, in the meantime, wanted to provide a little bit of background in reference to this. We recognize that the city of Hartford does have, and as we can all see, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. We already have a motor vehicle policy ordinance in the books. And so we wanted to make sure that given the different types of feedback that we've received from community members in light of the incident that occurred with Police Chief Doty's vehicle, earlier during the summer, that we made certain updates to the ordinance that we already have on the books. We recognize that in 2018, the mayor's office did update the policy of city vehicles use for city employees, and specifically, we're looking at city vehicles use by the mayor himself, the police chief, the fire chief. And so we also recognize that we already have on the books an ordinance related to making sure that vehicles have global positioning systems. And this particular ordinance, as you can see in the underlined sections, and it's pretty.
Hey, this is Councilman Mictum, by the way. I just called in, so I'm here as well.
Okay, great. So Councilman Mictum, I was just providing the background, letting folks who are tuning in know that we do have an existing ordinance that we are working with, and that we are making certain amendments. But if you want to jump in and describe the amendments, that would be great.
Sure. So basically, there was already an ordinance that I think you were saying right when I jumped in. There was already an ordinance that all city vehicles that are given to department heads, and that's what this concerns, would have GPS in them, and not GPS merely that you use to find your way, but GPS that the city could use to know where the vehicles are and have been. That's already that's already the law. And what we added was that, in fact, along those lines, no department head should receive a vehicle that does not have that technology in it. Because what came to light recently was that although that's been city law for some years, it has not, in fact, been followed. This came up in connection with the police chief's car accident, and at that time, folks from the mayor's administration said they weren't aware of the ordinance, and so his car didn't have the GPS, so we couldn't know where it had been. That's one part of this. It also incorporates some language that came from one of Mayor Bronin's own policies about making sure that the car is only used to go from work to home and stops that are in between work and home. So I think when we discussed it before, Councilman LeBron and I talked about stops for a Subway sandwich. In other words, if a person lives in Hartford and they work in Hartford, everywhere they go in Hartford is presumptively fine, right? That if they stop, to get a slice of pizza on their way home, or they go to the grocery store or something like that, that's fine. What would be forbidden in our ordinance, and what's already forbidden by the mayor's written policy, is that anyone should take the car somewhere that is not on the way from a work duty to where they live. And that also came up in the context of the police chief's accident, because he had the car relatively far from home and not on a work duty. And then what we've added, and I know this is a point of contention, and I hope we'll take it up today, what we had added in the amendments was the idea that if a department had violated this rule of going outside of that work and home route or rule, that they would lose use of the car. And I think Councilman Sanchez and Councilman Gale had raised some concerns that, at least in the case of the police chief and the fire chief, the cars they use are not just cars, that they have a lot of equipment that allows them to be working from the road and doing their jobs any old place. And so we wouldn't want to take away the car. Whatever sanction might be agreeable to anyone, that isn't a good one, because it really keeps them from being able to do their job well. And I'm open to, and I hope we'll have some discussion from the committee about a different way to do it. I think the other important part of this, what we'd amended, was to say that if the car were to be taken out of the usual route, that the department head should give notice to the mayor, get permission from the mayor or COO, and give notice to the council. And I'll mention that Councilwoman Rossetti had objected to that provision, notice to the council, because she said it wasn't really the council's job to oversee the department heads on a day-to-day basis, which I think is true and is a good point. So I want to put that out there, that my purpose there was not to make the council oversee the department heads, but to create a mechanism for transparency. In other words, the mayor hires the chief of police and the fire chief, and so we want someone outside of that hiring relationship, maybe with someone a little more impartial, to at least have the information. So it doesn't have to be that the council has it, and it doesn't have to be that the council is doing oversight. But I think what we've seen is that when there is, when the council knows about things become public that I think we would like to become public. But I'm open to suggestions from the committee about a way that we could create transparency without giving council a role that is not council's role. And after that, I would just say I'm open to any questions anyone has.
Councilman Mitchell, could you, I know this was discussed in the committee of the whole, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, though, there was actually a new ordinance that was requested to be drafted that kind of was a little bit more clear cut with some of the recommendations that were discussed in committee of the whole. But what would it be? Why would the council need to be notified of every time the vehicle is out of Hartford?
Well, I guess my thought was this. It doesn't, like I say, it doesn't have to be council. My thought is what I don't want. I mean, I think it makes sense that if someone is going to approve the car going out of Hartford or out of the usual route for some good reason, and I'm sure there are good reasons, that the person to approve it would be the mayor or the COO, right? And I think that's totally within their realm. But I do think there should be some transparency so that we, and by we, I don't just mean the council, I mean the people, know what's being approved. I mean, it's one thing if, for example, if the police chief says, well, I just want to go down to Essex on a Saturday, but I know that I might need to rush back to the city. Okay, like that doesn't feel very objectionable. On the other hand, if we find out that someone, drove their family to Disney World, and I'm not saying that's happened, but it's the kind of thing we would want to know if the mayor were approving. And again, I'm not talking about this mayor. I'm not trying to suggest anything untoward. I'm just saying transparency is better. So I thought if you tell the council, there's a good chance that someone on the council, if there's something inappropriate, is going to raise a fuss and make it public. That was my thought. But again, that could also be something that's just filed with the clerk's office or some quarterly reporting, whatever, just make sure that there's some transparency. That was my thought anyway.
To add to that, so I mean, if we look at other city employees, the city has a lot of vehicles, and so if you, suppose you are an employee within development services, and you want to use or take out one of the city vehicles so that you could go to a training that's in, say, Rhode Island. I'm just using different examples. So it is customary for that employee to notify their supervisor, and let it be known where they're going and to receive clearance so that they could use the city vehicle to go out of state. Presumably, when we're talking about the city vehicles themselves, I mean, we work, it's the bulk of the work is being done in Hartford. And so presumably we will be navigating the city, 5 days a week, or for other employees, more than 5 days a week. And so if we're going to go out of city lines, if we're going to go out of state, then that should definitely be noted, as is the case, has been the case for some time. But we just want to make sure that practice is occurring. And beyond that, if there is and there's also the other part of this, which is like, presumably, when we're looking at department heads, they're presumably living in the city of Hartford.
So I guess, and I saw Councilman Gill, I have one question. How do we not know? Do we have actual evidence that if a vehicle is requested to go outside of the city limits for whatever reason, that's already not recorded in that particular department by that immediate supervisor or director?
I don't know if I quite follow your question, Majority Leader.
So if I'm in development services and I'm requesting to use a city vehicle to go to Rhode Island for training, obviously I have to get permission. Do we know that this practice is not already being done by that department?
I follow you. I can answer that in part. My focus for this was the police chief and the fire chief, because they are the ones, at least per ordinance, who have 24/7 vehicles. And what I gleaned, what I understood from sort of what came after the police chief's accident down Chester, wherever that was that in fact there was no other record of that. And that's different than the training, right? He was just, down to his boat in Essex. So that was really the focus. I don't know if, for all the other departments, if someone takes a city vehicle, what the record keeping is. I hope that there's record keeping for that. But this ordinance is only focused on the 24/7 vehicles, which at least per ordinance are only mayor, police, and fire.
Okay, Councilman Gill.
Oh, thank you. Am I unmuted? Okay, yes, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I think the last comment of Councilman Mictum is kind of where I'll pick up. It strikes me that this ordinance has been introduced on the basis of a feeling that there was something wrong, something was done wrong by Chief Thody in having a city car in Essex or some other place downstate, wherever the heck he was. And I, for one, am not prepared to buy into that. I don't know that that's wrong. And so let me just kind of tick through a couple of what I heard Councilman Mictum stating as the rationale in this changed ordinance. If I'm not mistaken, there's an understanding that we have an existing ordinance and the existing ordinance just hasn't been enforced. So whatever part of this proposal is the same as the existing ordinance, it's unnecessary. What I suppose may be necessary is to have the administration enforce the ordinances. So that part of it, which I was just trying to look it up, but I think that has to do with the is that it got to do with the GPS? Yeah, they're supposed to be equipped with GPS. So that part's already in there. I see it. If we look at 860, it's in there. Now, when we come to the other things, limiting the use of the vehicle, these people are on duty 24/7. I don't think that it's appropriate for us to say that you can't take your vehicle out of Hartford at any time, whether it's a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You can't ever go anywhere with this vehicle because indeed we want, they should be allowed to have a life. They're not tied to the city of Hartford. And, they should be in touch. But at the same time, we know they're on call. They're on call to come back. And when they come back, they should have the vehicle that's got all the, that's important to have. So I'm not prepared to limit our police chief or our fire chief or our DPW director. I'm not prepared to say that they can't take an afternoon and go to the beach. or go to their boat down in Chester, to use Chief Thody here, if that's his. I also think it's a little, almost a little silly to talk about notifying every time you're going to leave the city with a vehicle. Yeah, I mean, okay, transparency is a wonderful thing, but there's a point where it gets to be a little silly. You know, we live in a fairly complex society here. I would bet that every one of us leaves the city of Hartford daily. You know, whether it's to just across the line to, you know, go get coffee at Bishop's Corner, or go to the mall. We're in and out of the city. This region functions as a region, not as the city of Hartford with its little 17 square miles doesn't have everything for everyone all the time here. So anyway, and then the sanctions aspect, I think we already commented on.
So can I respond
but anyway,
to that, Councilman Gill?
I just wanted to lay all those out. I don't see any real point in this ordinance change, to tell you the truth.
Well,
at this point,
if I could, it's hard for me because I'm not on video, so I can't look to somebody. But if I could respond, I think Councilman Gill, you raise a good point about what is already not being enforced, and that was why I thought we should have a sanction. Now, I think you and others have made a good point that the sanction I proposed was too great, and so that's where I had hoped for some suggestions of some sanction that wouldn't take away this necessary vehicle from at least the chief of police and the chief of fire. I think that's a very good point. But the thing is that the ordinance as it stands now has a rule, but nothing happens if you break the rule. So that's why I'm proposing, let's make it so if you break the rule, something happens. Now, I think I also, and again, I'm in the car waiting to go into my pediatrician's appointment for my daughter, but so I don't have the computer and the stuff in front of me. But my proposal had not been any trip out of the city. It had been, if I'm not mistaken, it had been a certain number of miles out of the city. And I think, again, that's something where I think we could be reasonable, so that I today was in like 6 towns trying to find something that no store had. So I'm sympathetic to what you say about how the region operates. And that's why I think maybe it's 50 miles, maybe it's something like that. And I really want to be clear, like, the goal here is not to create an ordinance that says Chief Thody did something wrong, right? We have the Independent Audit Commission working on that. We have the mayor who's made his own findings. It's really just, it brought to my attention and to Councilwoman Bermudez's attention the fact that we had an ordinance that we weren't enforcing. So, and I would add, you said you weren't willing to put those limitations, but I pulled those limitations from the mayor's own policy. So the mayor, at least on paper, is willing to put those limitations on his police chief and his fire chief. Like I say, on paper, because then we have the same problem that, in fact, we see that that very policy wasn't being followed. I mean, I'm trying to knock it into what Chief Thody did per se, but the mayor said he violated policy, so he did do something wrong.
Sorry,
There's an echo.
Whoever just called in, can you just mute your phone? Thank you. Councilman
So, again, thank you. I don't want to dwell on what Chief Thody did, but I think we can say there was a policy that he violated. And that's why I'm saying let's make what's in the policy the ordinance, and let's make the ordinance have sanctions. I think Councilman Gill and others have raised a good point that the sanction shouldn't be taking away the car. Maybe the sanction is just public censure, or up to mayor's discretion, no less than public censure. In other words, let's create transparency. And again, if leaving the city seems like too harsh, which I agree it is, I mean, I would argue, for example, that if you work in the city and you live in the city, it would count, like, you should be able to go to West Hartford or somewhere like that to get lunch, and that's on your way to and from, because, as Councilman Gill says, it's a little city wedged in among a lot of other places. But I think this committee could craft a rule like 50 miles that would not be burdensome, but would create transparency about the kind of trips that would raise the public's eyebrow. I think everyone would agree with Councilman Gale that going to get coffee in Bishop's Corner or running out to the mall in Manchester to pick something up is going to turn nobody's head. But I doubt that people would feel the same way if someone took the city car, to Maine for a long vacation weekend, or to New York City to see a Broadway show. Maybe, right? But if it's transparent, at least we can leave it up to the people to raise a fuss or not.
Okay. I saw Councilwoman Surgeon. Councilwoman Surgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilman Mitchum, I totally understand where you're going with this as far as transparency is concerned. One of the things as a manager, when you are hiring someone, you have the rules and regulation in hiring someone, and we already have on the books a ordinance that is respectful to all the department heads who have a 24-hour use of the vehicle. We elect a mayor and a council every 4 years. The charter gives the mayor the rights to negotiate with his department heads, which he's choosing to hire. And one of the issues which I see, in restraining the mayor's hands in negotiation with the department head is simply putting this ordinance on the books. We already have an ordinance on the books which actually, makes sure the cars are, having GPS, which has not been followed. And the ordinance has been in the books for several years. In 2008, the mayor had a agreement with hiring the police chief, the fire chief, and so on and so forth. And he or she is not adhering to following up with the agreement they have when they hired. I think that I personally would have sent a memo to the mayor asking that he follows up on the policies and the ordinance that is on the books. And so, therefore, I am a little bit apprehensive in voting positive for this due to the fact that I don't really want to tie a mayor's hand in negotiating for further people he or she would like to hire. And due to the fact that the police chief, the fire chief, is a 24-hour job, and I do have to agree with Councilman Gale, in essence, that when they are on a Sunday going down to the beach, they are on call 24/7. Even though when they're away, their assistant chiefs also know that they are away. But the bottom line is the buck stops with the police chief. So whether he's on vacation or not, and we do have an issue in the city, I've seen lots of police chief or fire chief have come back from their vacation when there are issues that happens in the city. So I'm a little bit apprehensive and reluctant to actually tie the mayor's hands with more than the ordinance that is on the books currently.
Thank you, Councilwoman Surgeon. There's Councilman Gale. All right. Any other comments?
If I could, I would suggest, because I know that when this came out of the council meeting, when was that, last week, I had said that I would draft a new version, and in my mind, I was thinking about the Public Safety Committee and not this committee, so I just didn't have it ready for today. And I think it would, because having heard the concerns, I wonder if I could just ask this committee to postpone, to take no action on this and put it over to the next meeting. And that will give me time to address specifically these concerns and maybe scale back the things people think are inappropriate while still preserving what I think is the core of it. And then we could come back and have something more, have a more substantial conversation that addresses what I think are really valid concerns that you know, Councilwoman Surgeon, Councilman Gale, that everyone has raised.
Councilman LeBron.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Councilman Mickham, if you're going to go back to the table, what I would also, you know, I think the biggest thing around here is the fact that there was no GPS as request, as was stated, as all the other council colleagues were stated. So in going back and drafting, I think one of the major questions is drafting policies around it, is if GPS was in this vehicle, would the other stuff that you were mentioning, would they be moot points? And my guess is that a lot of them would be. So I think the focus would be around, if we're going to, in terms of our energies, is how, you know, how do we focus our energies to making sure that, number one, that these GPSs are in the vehicle. So that way, I think, just even from a safety perspective, you know, these folks are on 24/7, you know, from a safety perspective, you know, God forbid something should happen to the vehicle, to those type of things that we can track. I think from that aspect, using the GPS as the focal point and then building off of that, I think might be very helpful, at least for me.
I appreciate that suggestion very much. Thank you.
Okay, the chair will entertain. Oh, Councilman Gale. You're on mute, Councilman.
I don't know if I'm about to make the motion that the chair wanted to entertain. I want to add something, though, to the motion. Hearing the whole discussion about GPS, this is an administration issue, right? The ordinance is there, and it says, and by the way, you couldn't sanction Thody for there not being GPS in his vehicle, because it's not Thody's job to put the GPS in his vehicle. It's the administration's job to put GPS in everybody's vehicle. I mean, at least that's the way I would look at it. I don't think, you know, the fire chief's supposed to put his own GPS in his own vehicle, but we as the city are supposed to arrange for it. Anyway, in conjunction with a motion to postpone this to the next committee meeting, I would like to see the administration show up at the next committee meeting and tell us what they're doing to now comply with the ordinance that's on the books. And maybe if we hear from the administration, you know, maybe by that time they'll have GPS on all these vehicles. I don't know. They certainly, it doesn't seem like administration suggested that it's burdensome, and they want us to amend the ordinance to eliminate it. So my motion would be to postpone this one to the next OMBGA committee meeting, but at the same time ask administration to come and tell us what progress they've made towards compliance with the existing ordinance 2-860.
I second the motion.
Okay, and we just want to welcome Council President Rosado and Councilman Sanchez for joining the call. So the motion has been made by Councilman Gale to postpone this particular ordinance until the next OMBGA committee meeting, with the understanding that the administration will be reporting to the OMBGA committee meeting on their progress on GPS installation of city vehicles. And it's been seconded by, was Council President? I heard
Yes.
two people at the center. Second by Council President. Any other discussion on this motion? Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor of postponement?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposals? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. This item is postponed to next month's meeting.
Thank you all. I'm going to check out because I got to go take my kid to the doctor.
All right, Councilman, you take care. Okay, moving on. We have agenda item number 2, which is a communication from Mayor Bronan with accompanying resolution authorizing the transfer to the disbursement of $1,412,722.52 in outstanding delinquent personal property and motor vehicle taxes for tax bills that the tax collector has certified as unlikely to be collected. In most instances, the businesses associated with the tax have closed and the owner cannot be located or the owner is deceased. And we have here Leanne Rawls, who is the Director of Finance, and also to Nancy Rich, who is a tax collector. And we will turn it away to either of you two.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and fellow committee members. So Connecticut General Statutes requires that the tax collector put in front of you annually a listing of all taxes that have been deemed uncollectible. And what happens is we request that these taxes be transferred to what we call the suspense book. And the request for FY20, as Mr. Chair had mentioned, is $1.4 million. And I will let Nancy Raish, the tax collector, get into the details of that $1.4 million for you all.
Sure. Good evening, members. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So it's a process we go through every year. This year, the suspense book, the suspense taxes are solely taxes of deceased taxpayers. So these have been certified by the city's outside collection agency as uncollectible, because as I said, the taxpayers are deceased. 1.4 million in only personal property. I'm sorry, only motor vehicle tax. So if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you, Nancy and Leanne. I have a question. So you mentioned the fact that these are motor vehicle taxes that are unsuccessfully collected due to a person being deceased. Has the city or there's an outside consultant go after the person's estate, try to collect that? Could you also explain what type of other measures you take to try to attempt to collect the taxes?
Okay. So of all the taxes that we collect, these are deemed by the collection agency to be uncollectible. It doesn't mean that we can't collect them if it's found that there are other, avenues. If the estate is viable and there's a way to collect it. It doesn't mean that we can't collect it. It just means that we move it off the city's books because we are deeming them to be uncollectible. If that changes, then we can go after them. But these particular taxes were found to be all uncollectible, and there was no estate that could be reached in that case.
Thank you. We'll open the floor to any of my committee members. Questions? All right. No questions. Doesn't look like Councilman Gill. You reading my mind?
That's one quick question.
Councilman.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
No, go back. Okay.
All right. Hey, just one quick question. Hey, you talk about our collection agency that helps out and is really making the determination that these are uncollectible. The collection agency, they have some incentive to try to collect these, right? They get some percentage of all these?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what percentage do they get?
It's 15% of whatever's collected.
All right. So if they could find an estate, they would go after it because this is money for them.
Yes, they would.
Okay. I Mr. Chair would make a motion to send this back to council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
It's been properly motioned and seconded to send this item back to the council with a favorable recommendation. Any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposals? Any abstentions? Ayes have it. Thank you very much. This item is passed to the next council committee meeting. Sorry, next council meeting. Moving on, item number 3, which is communication from Mayor Bronin with the company resolution authorizing the mayor to make transfers in the fiscal year 2020 general fund budget. And we have our Office of Management and Budget representatives here. You all are on mute.
Yeah. Good afternoon. This is
Hello.
Yolanda Lazauskas, Deputy Director. How is everybody doing?
Oh, good.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So in my team, I have also Mike Lupkas. I don't see him on a call. He was there, our interim director, and Jeff Holland, assistant director, to answer your questions. So we are proposing to make a transfer of $6.5 million from general fund available health line, benefit line to CAP reserve account. So this is going to be available for CAP spending in FY 2021, and if there's residual left, we can spend over the years. So you all know, in FY 2021 budget, on CAP pay-as-you-go line item, the budget line was reduced from 10.4 to 6.8 million to close the gap. So this money will help us to support our CAP projects in FY 2021. Any questions? It's
Any questions from committee? Councilman Gale.
Oh, I am unmuted. Okay. Do I understand then that the way for us to read this is at the end of June 30, last year's on last year's budget, maybe I'm totally wrong about this. Did we end up with a surplus that we're now able to transfer over to CIP? Is that what this 6.5 actually represents? Unspent money from last year's budget from various departments?
That is correct statement. Yes, we end up being favorable. But as we went from, every month looking at our projection, I don't recall the month, but we did project additional spending in CAP because of the Beaver School funding, which at the end of the year, we were able to support from our CAP budget of FY 2020 that we had in the budget line item. So this funding, and then we end up in surplus. This funding we're going to be putting in the CAP reserve, and as you know, in FY 21 and a few years, later, we do have some school construction projects going that we need to put some money as a city portion to support this construction. So due to this favorability, we try to, think ahead of and put that money in CAP reserve. So we're not going to go short. That explains.
Okay, it seems like the councilman has some technology glitches. Councilwoman Surgeon.
Thank you. In the CIP funds where you're transferring the 6.5 million, do you know, or is there any anticipation of what programs you're going to be spending this 6.5 million on? Or you're putting it in the reserve?
We're putting it in the reserve. As of now, we don't have any particular projects. However, I would say there is a Wi-Fi project, citywide project, that potential we might use some funding from this CAP reserve. However, at this point, I do not have exact number how much the city needs to put for this project. But if we do, that would be the place we would take from.
Okay, so at least you have some idea or some something coming down the line that you believe you may be needing 6.5 million for. Yeah, I remember you said school construction, which we have to pay 5% towards. Am I correct in my assumption?
That is correct, plus an eligible cost, and that's usually also run to up to 6% of the project. And as the school audit completed, then, they would tell us exactly how much, but I would say, 5% plus some ineligible cost of could be 5 to 6%. It's always a it's always like guess number at the beginning of project. But yes, that's you are correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to favorably send back to the council the approval for transferring the money to the fiscal 2020 general budget. Transfer into the fiscal 2020 general budget.
Thank you for the correction. Is there a second? It's been properly motioned and second that this item will be sent favorably to the next city council meeting. Any other discussion? Seeing none, on the favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposals and extensions? The ayes have it. And this item is being sent to the council with a favorable recommendation. Next.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jolita.
You're welcome anytime.
All right. Have a good evening. Next item on the agenda is a resolution, item number 5, resolution requesting that any proposed ordinance submitted to the town clerk's office by a member of the Court of Common Council or by the mayor includes a brief 2 to 3 sentence statement on what the ordinance seeks to do and have a frequently asked questions document attached to it following a public hearing based on the questions asked. And Councilwoman Bermudez.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Majority Leader, Chair. So the reason why we introduced this resolution is because we've gotten a lot of feedback from the community, just wanting a little bit more information, background information. And there, we receive all different kinds of ordinances and from the mayor's office, and also we also draft different types of ordinances. And some of them are shorter in length. Some of them could be 2 pages, 1 page, and then there are others that could be 45 pages long. And so the community in the past and continues to make this request to see if there could be some kind of summary. The same way that, for instance, when you read a report, let's say like an academic paper, there's an abstract that is provided that has 2 or 3 paragraphs. Now, we all on council understand that when we receive an ordinance or when we submit an ordinance ourselves, we submit it with a letter. The letter comes first to the address to the entire council body that provides a pretty good summary of the ordinance, and then we actually see the ordinance followed right after that letter. But when folks in the community or when anyone is searching within Unicode what an ordinance, whatever ordinance they're looking for, you will not find that letter because that's not standard protocol to place every single letter that's submitted through council, because what ends up being placed on Unicode is the ordinance itself. And so it would be, we feel that it would be a great idea if, as part of whatever ordinance ends up being voted by the council body that ends up being approved, that there be that kind of 2 to 3, it could be just a couple of sentences, but something to summarize what the ordinance is about so that folks in the community have a better understanding. And then in reference to the frequently asked questions, so there's no way for you to know ahead of time what kinds of questions will be elicited will come from the community until there's a public hearing. And so we've found that, and we all see this, right, that when there's a public hearing, sometimes people in the community who are testifying part of their testimony is actually asking council questions about the ordinance at hand. And so it would be a great idea if we can take those questions that are asked during the public hearing process and then provide them as a frequently asked questions document. It could be maybe 1 page or half a page, depending on how many questions there are. Maybe it's less than half a page, but so that the community has those questions answered in reference to the ordinance. So that's kind of where it stems from. The best example that I can cite is what occurred last year when the mayor's office undertook a pretty heavy lift of redrafting the housing ordinance. The housing ordinance hadn't been updated in several decades for the city of Hartford. So, you know, we thank the mayor for updating that, the housing ordinance, and that also comes through a lot of support from community and thanks to the, you know, No More Slumlords campaign that really pushed a lot of questions to the forefront of what needed to be changed. But so in that example, the ordinance itself was 45 pages long. And when we attended, whether it was the public hearing or different community meetings about this, one of the things that I distinctly remember Development Services Director Eric Johnson mentioned is, well, we just don't have, there isn't a requirement for, say, an FAQ. If there was one, we would create one. And I think that we really have to be forward thinking when the community is providing and requesting for information to be a little bit more concise and more digestible. We used to have, and God bless her soul, Linda Bayer, who did a tremendous work in abbreviating a lot of information by having the council packet in a way available to the community through then Hartford 2000, now known as Hartford Next, in a way that was summarized, but we no longer have that. And so there are certain deficits that we're working with. So when we're thinking about how can we provide information to the community, this is an example of something that could be easily done. And I've also had a conversation with Thea, COO Thea, and she said that she was something that they would consider.
Any questions from my colleagues on the presentation? No? Oh, Councilwoman Surgeon?
Councilman Bermudez, is any other city or towns doing this? Or are we going to be the first one to do something like this?
I'm not sure if which other specific cities or towns are or are not doing this, but I know that in academia, when you are right before you're gonna, like what I referenced before, when you're reading a report, there's always an abstract that's provided that you can just figure out, okay, is this a report I'm going to read? What is this about? Before you actually delve into it. And it's it certainly seems to work very well in getting all that information available.
Sorry. At the state level, basically, it's when a legislation is passed, it's the actual legislation, that you are actually, maybe 10 pages. But when you're going and looking at, it just tells you exactly what is needed to be done. Then there is an opportunity to actually go and pull up from that legislation all the discussion, all the information that went along with the discussion regarding that legislation. So would you consider, okay, with the Muni Code providing something just similar to the state where, in the town clerk's office, you can possibly look up that first page, the summary, that goes along with it. So therefore, if someone wants to get more knowledge base on what the actual ordinance or resolution is doing, they can take a look at that summary page. I'm not quite sure how to do so. But it's just a thought. Would you consider doing something like that? Because again, I find that when legislation is passed at the Capitol, that affects my job, I go back and take a look at, what was the discussion, that implemented this change.
That's a great example, Councilwoman Surgeon. That's an excellent example. Yeah, and that's something that is easy for people to access when they go on the state website. They can look at previous testimony from any group or individual. And so it's certainly helpful in understanding further the legislation at hand. And I think that's fantastic to also include that as part of this.
So could I make a favorably ask you if you would consider, putting something like that in this resolution that you're proposing?
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I'm sorry?
Absolutely. Yes.
Right. And also the frequently asked question is all that information is there in that discussion. So it kind of covers what you're trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can favorably ask if you could, add that to your resolution, I would love to support something like that due to the fact that I know it's very helpful to me in my job.
Yes, definitely. Are there any other suggestions as well as part of this resolution?
I like the fact that if it can be whatever the piece of policy that's introduced, that as when they scan the ordinances into Unicode, that this document be a part of that transmittal. So it is actually a part of the certified copy of the resolution or ordinance, well, basically ordinance, because all ordinances are in Unicode. But this item is a part of the attachment that's certified.
To have this, I couldn't hear the last part of what you said.
To have the item as part of the attachment as the certified ordinance.
Okay. So, what about if in the first resolve, right before the "and be it further," we include the language "and to include written public testimony submitted"? Or would you prefer that to be its own separate resolve?
You're on mute, Councilwoman.
Sorry, would be great to be the own separate resolve. I want to see that really actually stands out that, this is really important to be done.
Okay. All right. So then after the first resolve,
Yep.
strike out the word "be it further,"
Mhm.
keep the word "and."
Yes.
To include written public testimony
Mhm.
submitted as part of Muni code search for the ordinance. Or accompanying the ordinance.
Accompanying the ordinance.
Okay.
One of the things also is when you read the committee report, okay, that's something where there's a lot of question and answers from the council that are I don't know all staff, but in their committee report, a lot of this information is also there. For example, just tonight, when we asked the question, on the, 6.5 million transfer, all that information should be in the committee report and also attached to that ordinance.
So in reference to the reports from the committee on that particular item?
Yes. Or maybe that's going a little bit too far, but just a thought.
Okay. I think including that might be more. Only, oh, and I say that only because there, you know, we've read committee reports where the report itself only references or documents how the item was voted on, whether it was favorable and how many abstentions, and
Okay.
so I don't know how extensive that would be, but I would like to make a motion to add that resolve to this resolution, resolved to include, have this be the second resolve, to include written public testimony submitted as part of Unicode search accompanying the ordinance, and would welcome any other edits by this committee.
I second that.
Okay.
All right, the motion has been made with the amendments and properly second. Councilwoman Ramirez, will you be submitting a replacement resolution?
Yeah, so I can submit the resolution, the updated resolution, to you all. I'm thinking we could, I can obviously send it through email so that everybody in this committee receives it. And it's something that you want to go back to the committee now, or do you want me to send the changes that have been made on the floor first?
I think if we can reflect that the replacement, we will vote on this at the next council meeting with the understanding that the replacement will be submitted prior to.
All right. Okay, I'll make sure to send it your way.
Okay. So the motion has been made and properly second, with the understanding that the replacement resolution will be submitted. Any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions, any opposals? Hearing or seeing none, the ayes have it. So this item will be passed favorably to the next council meeting. Okay, moving on, seeing that we have no other items on our OMBGA committee meeting to discuss, this committee meeting is adjourned until next month. And for those that are listening in, if you would like to listen to or watch our public hearing, it will be starting at 7 o'clock. And so we thank you for all those that have participated in this OMBGA committee meeting and watched online. And please remember to stay safe, stay healthy, and wear your mask. Have a good evening.